Struggling to build complex UIs in Jetpack Compose? Well, in this tutorial, we'll code this UI using Jetpack Compose from scratch. Even if you're a beginner, we'll explain every step. Don't worry about that. We'll learn simple composables to custom shapes, navigation, and more. So let's get our hands dirty. Let's code together and build this app UI. Okay, so before we get started here, I have added several things which are going to help you to get started. So you can get the initial project. The link is provided in the description box below. So go to GitHub and download the project. So inside here, I have changed several things. So let's go to our build.gradle module app. You can see I have added here the serialization library, and other libraries which I have added here is for Google Fonts, which we're going to use for custom fonts. Then we want more icons, so we're going to use extended icons, and also the navigation compose. And in order to use the navigation compose, we have to use a serialization library that is called serialization for a case, found inside our library catalog here. So you can see we have our dependencies which are defined here. Next, you can see inside here we have our dummy data. So inside here we have defined a simple data class that is just for food items, and these are the properties which we're going to need. And here I have defined one simple state that is going to be keeping track of each item. So you can see if it's liked or not, and we can mutate this. So you can keep track here of specific data that are required for that particular item. And these are the dummy data which we have defined. So you can see we have here a drawable, and when you go to our res file, and let's go to our drawables, I have defined these drawables here, so you can pick any type of images which you want. Okay, now let's get started here. So the first case which we want to do here is to create this bottom bar navigation. So you can see we have this bottom navigation, and here we have a cutout shape. So with material 3, you cannot get this out of the box. So we can try to create this ourselves. So let's do this. Okay, now let's create here a new class of file. So let's select Kotlin class of file and select file. Let's create here components. Okay, now let's create here our shape. So you can see inside here our design that we have a cutout shape, but with material 3 there is no this design here per se, so we have to create our own custom one. So let's create here a class to represent that particular shape. So let's call this BottomAppBar cutout shape. So you can use this shape any place. So we want two parameters here to control. The first case is the FAB diameter. So you can see we have and this one is going to be a float. Another case is the FAB margins, and this one is going to be in terms of DP. Okay, so this class is going to inherit from the shape, and here we have to implement this one method that is creating the outline. Okay, so first we want to get the FAB diameter and the FAB margins. So for this case, we can get the FAB margin in terms of pixel because we want to use this inside our calculations, and when we are drawing inside the canvas, we cannot use DP, so we have to convert this to pixel. So for this case, we can use the density this method provides with and convert this by using a FAB margin. Then the next case is we want to get the notch radius. So the radius of our cycle here, so you can see this is like a circular shape, so we want to get the radius of it roughly. So we can do a simple mathematics here. So we can get the FAB diameter and divide this by 2. But we want to add a little bit of margin because that the FAB diameter we don't want to be equal to the shape. So for this case, we can use the the FAB margin pixel. Okay, so we add a little bit of padding to that our radius in order to create that. So the FAB should not be equal to that. The next case is we want to get the center. So you can see here we have this shape here. So we want to get the center precisely here. So we can easily do this by getting the center X. The next case is we want to define the depth of that notch, which we're going to have. So you can see here we have the depth. So you can define any value, or you can make this value to be dynamic. So for a case, we're just going to hard code the value which I found working perfectly. So we can call this notch depth. Okay, so in order to draw this, we can use a custom shape. So we can create here a path. Now let's construct here the path using the composable. Let's call .apply in order to apply this path. Okay, so the first case is we want to draw the first point And to make the point there, assume like you're moving a pen, so you want to start to draw. So our first point should be the top left corner of our drawing place. So for our case, this is 0F to 0F. So now we are starting from here. This is the top left corner of our point. So for this case, we move that. Now we want to draw a line from this point until here. So we can create here line 2. And here we can use our center X as, and we minus the notch radius, and here we can keep 0F. Okay, so we draw this line from here to here. So because our center should be somewhere here, so we want to remove the notch radius and also to accommodate with the center. So from here, the center, so we remove that notch radius. Okay, so now what we want to do is to draw this curvature here. So you can see we have a smooth curve. And to do this by using the path, we can use a cubic Bezier. That means we have two control points and the point that we want to draw. So for this case, we can define here a simple control point. Let's create here a cubic 2. So the first case is we want to get the center X minus the notch radius to get that point. And here we are multiplying with 0.66. This one is just to keep our values, and 0F. So we are starting here at the top left corner. So this is our first control point, and we want to draw here. So we are using this 0.66 here. It's just a try and error value that is going to give us that smooth curvature here. Okay. Now, after that, we want to draw another control point. That the control point is going to be here, so that we can pull that curvature. So let's use here center X minus the notch radius. We multiply again with 0.66. Our Y value, that is the notch depth. So you can see here, because we are starting here at the top, then our control point is the notch depth, that the depth, which is the maximum point. So here is 80F for our case. And lastly here, we can now draw from center X to notch depth. Okay, let's keep it F. So right now we have drawn this curvature here, the first part. Now again, we can do by drawing this second part, and we can do it by reversing this. So let's go and press Ctrl D here to create another cubic. Now what we want to do is to reverse this. So we want to start from here. So you can see we are starting from here going to the top. So our first control point is going to start here. Now this will be the point here, going to this point here and create that curvature. And here our points can be different. So here we are going to have center X plus the notch radius to go to the top point, that is 0F, because this is our 0F now. Okay, so we have drawn that starting from here. So getting this point and going to this point here. So we have here our two concave, and now we have completed our arc that we have created. Now the next case is we want to draw now the line from here to this place here. So what we can do is use the line tool, and here is size.width going to 0F. So we can keep here our Y value because that is constant. We can give it 0F. Now, after that, we can complete to draw the other shapes. So you can see we have drawn the top part. So now we want to draw all of this part and complete it. So for this case, let's create line 2. So we can call here size.width. That is going to be our top point, and size.height. And we can draw it from here. Tap, tap. Okay. Now, after that, we can complete now to draw the bottom part. So let's create line 2, 0F. And here we can give it size.height. And now we can close our path. Now, after that, we have to return. We can call outline.generic. Okay, so now here we have our custom shape. So we can use this by creating here now the Cutout Bottom sheet. Now let's create a composable, because this is just the shape. So we can create a composable to use that. Okay, so the FAB margin here, we can give it 56 dp. So you can give it any shape which you want. So we can give it margin, and here we can use a 16 dp. This one can be the FAB size. Okay, so we can provide here the color so that we can customize this. Okay, now let's get our FAB diameter. So we can get it in terms of pixels, so we can use with local density. Okay, now let's use our FAB size to pixel so that we can get our FAB diameter here. Okay, now we can construct our cutout shape. So FAB diameter, we can just pass in here the FAB diameter, and then we can pass in here the FAB margin. Let's give it FAB margin here. So that's it. We can create now a surface to contain all this shape. Okay, let's fill the max width, and we can give it a constant height of 64 dp. Now here we can use the shape, and let's use our cutout shape. Simple as that. Now we can create a shadow elevation and give it 8 dp. And for the part of color, we can give it the color here. Okay, so everything looks perfectly. Okay, so everything is going to be inside like a row. So we can create here a row. Let's customize the row here. So we can give it the modifier. Okay, next case, we want to give it the horizontal arrangement. So let's call arrangement, and we can give it space around. And we want to use the alignment center vertically, and then we can pass in here the content. Okay, and for a content, we can pass in here the composable. Let's call this content. Okay, let's pass the content here. Okay, so this is supposed to be a row scope. So let's give it row scope. Now the error is going to go away. So now we have here a custom bottom bar. So we can use this Cutout Bottom App bar. And I think we can use the modifier here. Now everything is looking perfectly. Okay, now let's preview here our cutout shape. So we can create here a preview. And then we can say preview. Let's call here our composable. And to pass in here, we can just repeat 2 times and pass in here the text. Okay, so we want just to preview. Let's go inside here and preview. Okay, so our preview is ready, and you can see this is hilarious. So you can see it has drawn something like this. I don't know. Okay, so one thing which we have to do, because here we are reversing what we are doing, instead of minus here we have to add. So for this case, let's create here an addition. You can see the changes. It's going to change. Now we can add here also. And now you can see we have a perfectly cutout shape. So I think now everything is looking perfectly. You can see we have here if we have the bottom items. So for now, this is just a preview. Okay, so I think everything is looking perfectly. So let's proceed with the next step. Okay, so now next we want to create the actual bottom bar. So we can do this by creating our screen, and we're going to use a scaffold in order to keep everything inside. So for this case, let's create here a new composable. So let's go inside here and create a new coding class of file, and we want to call this footer. Okay, now let's create here a new composable. Next, I want to add only one parameter here, that is on footer item click. So whenever we're going to click the footer item, I want to pass in here the index. So now let's create a scaffold. So if you don't know, a scaffold is just going to be an API that provides the slots of passing different things. Like we can pass in a bottom bar, we can pass in floating action button, and other things like a snack bar. So for case, let's first give it the modifier. That is the default modifier we have created. Next, let's create the floating action button. With the floating action button here, let's call our floating action button. And here we have the on click. Next, let's give it the container color. So we can use the material theme, color scheme, and we want to use the secondary color. Okay, now the shape, we want this to be circular shape. So it can take its own shape, but we want it to be circular. I want to offset it. So you can see by default, this is going to be on top here. So I want to offset it and bring it a little bit down. So we can use a modifier for this case. Let's call that offset. And here, let's offset the Y and give it something like 36 dp. Now inside here, we can create the icon. So let's just pass the image vector. And here, the content description, we can just call this as a FAB. Okay. Now for our floating action button, I think everything is looking perfectly. The next case is we want to change the floating action button position. So we want to make it to the center, so we can call FAB positions. Okay, so here is we're going to have the inner padding. Okay, now here we can create our bottom bar. So you can see we have slots of passing different things. So for our case, we have created our cutout bottom up bar. Here we can pass in the content, and if you want to give it different things. Okay, so by default, this one is going to intertwine with the navigation icons. So if you don't want that, let's pass in here the modifier navigation bar padding. So this way it cannot intertwine with the navigation bar. So when we run it, you can see, you can just remove this and see that there is an effect. Okay, now here we can create the icons. So you can see we have several icons here. And on click, whenever the icon is going to be clicked, now you can just and pass in here the image vector. Okay, so we have the home. Let's duplicate this, press Ctrl D. So here we have the person. Here we can use auto mirrored. Let's use default, and here we can use something like message. And similarly, here we can use the favorite one. So let's just go below here and create a preview. Okay, let's minimize this. Our food go amp theme. And here we can call our phone app screen. For example, let's go to our preview. Okay, so now you can see our preview is successfully. So here we have our node is looking perfectly. Okay, so the next case which we want to build here is actually this item here. So you can see we have this food go, and basically we're using a custom font. So let's create a custom font and also the custom theme. We can easily do this by using the material theme builder. So let's see how we can do it. Okay, so now you can come to this website here, material theme foundation builder, so that you can get this. So basically I'm going to change here the source color. If you want, you can customize this to your need. Okay, now we can apply and we can make this to match. So basically here we have defined our colors. So if you want to change, for example, the display and other things, you can use here to change the fonts. So for a case, we are going to use this lobster. So we can choose lobster. You can see the font here is changing. Let's click export theme. And here basically we can export this on different. Okay, so inside here, you can open up material theme, the folder which is being downloaded. So let's just open up. You can see we have these values. So basically we can just press Ctrl C and copy this. Let's go directly to Android Studio. Okay, so inside here, Android Studio, directly we are going to go inside here res folder, and we want to paste this value here. Let's press OK. Okay, so now you can see we have this value. These are the certificates for our fonts, which we are going to use. Okay, so now we have here our res folders. The next case, let's go back here. Okay, so now here we have our color. Now what we can do is let's go back to our theme here. So you can open up the theme, and inside here, what we want to copy is these values here. So you can copy the light color scheme and the dark color scheme. Let's go back to Android Studio here, and we can come back here. So we can paste the values here. Okay, so you can see we are pasting these values. And the next case is we are going to change this one to use the dark color scheme. And here it's going to use the light color scheme. And if you want to change the typography, basically you can just change it directly here. Okay, so for our theme, I think everything is looking perfectly. Okay, so inside here, let's create a column in order to create our UI. The first case, we are going to pass in here the modifier. And here we can use the inner padding, and we can give it 16 dp padding. So the first case we want to create here is our Okay, so the first case we want to create here is our header text. Okay, so what we want to do is to create this particular text here. So we can come here below and create our header text. So the header text here is going to be simple. So basically we're going to use here a column, and we want to fill the max width. And basically inside here, we are going to use a text. So the text that is going to be food go. that is the text, and we're going to change the style, that is going to be display medium, and the font family we are going to use display family. Then we are going to give a little bit of a spacer and create here the text, that is order your favorite food. Now for this case, we can come here below and call our header text. Now let's preview here the changes we have made. Okay, so now here is our view. But you can see that the text is not similar to this one until we run this in our actual device, because this one is going to make a network request in order to get that particular font. For now, let's just leave it as how it is. But when we launch it, then this one is going to work perfectly fine. Okay, so now we have here our header text. The next case is we want to create a little bit of a spacer in order to create our search items. So we can pass in here the modifier. Let's give it a height of 8 dp. Now the next case is we want to create this search item. So we can create separate composable down below here. Okay, so I'm going to add this composable here. So you can see we are using here a modifier, and I'm going to keep this text and their own filters. So you can see we are making this stateless composable, meaning that it's not going to contain a state. So the state is going to be hoisted to the composable caller. So this one is going to avoid a lot of things, and also it's going to help us with a lot of things. So you're going to see why. Okay, so after that, then we are going to have here the row in order to display every items. So we want to fill the max width and center everything vertically in order to keep everything center vertically, and also the arrangement to be center. Now we're going to create here a text. This is just the text field. So we have the value, that is search, on value change, that is going to be the on search. And without these two values, then the text field is not going to respond to anything. Then we can create a placeholder, that is just the search, and the leading icon, which is going to be this icon here. Next, we are going to change the colors, because the text field by default is going to have an indicator at the below. So we want to remove that, and to remove that, then we are going to use the focused indicator color and also the unfocused indicator color to transparent. Another case is by default, the text field is going to have a circular shape. So what we want to do is to have rough corners at the edge. For this case, we're going to use the material theme shapes large, and this one is going to provide us with that. Then we can give the width of 16 dp to push the things to the side. Now to create this icon here, we can use a surface, and similarly we can use a shape to be medium and the color to use primary container color. And for our case here, we have the box in order to center everything to the center. So we can use the alignment and also give it a padding of 16 dp to give it a room to breathe. Then we can create here the icon. So if they want to click this particular icon, then they can use the on click, that is the on filter. If we click, then something is going to happen at here. So I think here everything is looking perfectly. So what we can do is go back here to our search content. Let's pass in here the search content. Okay, so we said that we are going to hoist the state, and the state is going to be to the composable caller, and for a case is the food screen. So for a case, we're going to create here a state, and this one is going to be search and on search. For this, we can use remember and use a mutable state of an empty string. So we have created here our state, and here we are destructuring. So we have the search and the on search. And for this case, we can use those two functions. So for a case, here we can call now the search, and we want to make everything readable and call here the on search. Then we can call here the on search. Okay, so we don't want to react to anything. So for the filter, we are going to leave the empty lambda. Now let's re-preview again the changes which we have made. Okay, now you can see everything is starting to take the shape. So we have here our search item, and you can see this is similar to what we have here. So we have the search, and the filter icon is looking perfectly. So the next case is we want to build this particular item here. Okay, so let's create these filters here. And basically we can duplicate the space here. Okay, so now we can create here our item filter. So the first case which we want to do, let's create another composable. So here we want to get the list of items, and this one is going to be a list, and we are going to create the list of filters. So let's go to the top here, and I'm going to create this list of filters. So you can use different types. So it's just an enum class. And here we can just call filters. Next, we can pass in here the selected color, the selected filter. And lastly, the unselected filter. So if there is any changes to the filter, now because here we're going to be scrolling, so we can use here a lazy row. And let's pass in here the modifier and give the actual modifier which we have. So we can use here items. And here we can change to filters. Okay, so for our filters here, we're going to use the input chip and we can check if it's selected. And to check if it's selected, then we can easily use the selected filter if it's going to be equal to the filter that we have. And then we can change the on click. And whenever we click, then we can call on selected filter and pass in here the filter. Lastly, we can pass in the label. So we can give it a text. Okay, so we can give the room to breathe. So let's pass in here the modifier. Now let's go back here and call our filters. Now for the items, let's use filters.entries. Okay, so similarly, we're going to hoist the state. So what we can do, let's go above here. Let's keep. So this one is going to be filter. Here, whenever the filter is going to change. And by default here, we can use our filter. Let's use all by default. So here we can pass in our selected filter. And here we can call on filter change. So now let's try here to see. Okay, so now our filters are displayed successfully. We can try to start the interactive mode. So when we click, you can see the filter is actually changing. And it's also scrollable here. So we can change this to different items. So you can see everything is working perfectly. Next, we have to create these food items here. So let's see how we can actually achieve this. Okay, so the first case here, which we want to do is to create a lazy vertical grid. And we can call these columns and give it a grid cells. Let's use grid cells.column. We want to give it a fixed size. So we want to use 2 columns only. And inside here now we can define our items. Let's use our dummy food items. So the next case is we want to create our food item. So we can come here below and create this particular food item. Let's create a new composable. And here we can pass in the actual food item. Okay, so for our food item here, we can see everything is contained inside a box, something like a card. So here we can call our card and let's give it the modifier. So we can pass in here the modifier. Next, let's create a column in order to manage our items. Although we have the column scope, but we don't have the fine greedy control. So for a case, let's pass in here the arrangement to be center and the horizontal alignment to be centered horizontally also. Let's pass in here the modifier and we can give it fill max width. Okay, the first case, we want to create this particular image. So we can create here an image and we can pass in here the painter resource. And basically we can use the food item and use the image res directly here. Next, the content description, we can make it to be null. Now we can give it the modifier and we want to give it a particular height. Let's give it 100 dp. I think that will work perfectly. And for content scale here, we want to call content scale.crop in order to make everything fit inside that particular viewport. Next, we can create here a little bit of a spacer in order to give it a room to breathe and give it a height of 6 dp. Now inside here, we can create this text and this particular text directly. Let's create here a text composable. Let's use the food item and we want to use the name. Okay, so we can change here the style. Let's use the title medium and we can give it the font weight bold. Okay, now everything here is looking perfectly. Now we can create another spacer. Let's go Command D and we can keep it here. And we want this to have 4 dp for the spacer. Next, we can create this particular here. Let's just duplicate this. And we can paste it here. Instead, we can use the tagline. And for tagline here, we can change use bold medium and remove the font weight here. Let's duplicate the spacer and keep it below here. And for a case, we can give it 6dp in order to differentiate with this one here. Now, the next case is we want to create this particular here. And basically, we can use a row to do this. So let's create here a row and keep everything organized perfectly. First, let's give it the modifier. We can fill the max width, and we want to give it a padding horizontally of 8dp. Now let's get the vertical alignment. So we can align it center vertically and the horizontal arrangement to be space between. Now here we have these two items, and basically we can use another row to contain those two items. So we can make the alignment to be center vertically. Okay. Now we can create the icon for that field star. So let's create here icon, and we can use the image vector. For content description, we can just give it null here. Okay, now let's pass in here the spacer. Let's give it a space of 4dp. Now we can pass in that particular rating. So let's just copy this. Let's Control C and paste it here. Now, instead of tagline, we can use our rating. Let's call this to string, because this way, the font weight, we can leave it to be body medium. I think that is going to look perfectly. Now, lastly, we can create this button, which is going to be invoked whenever we click it. So for a case, we can create an icon button. And for on click here, we are going to change something. So here we can call our food item. If is liked, then we can negate this with, so we are changing the state of that particular item by taking its state and negating it by using the exclamation mark here. Okay, now next here we can display our icon. Let's use the image vector, and here you can see we are going to use the icon differently depending if it's liked or not. So for this case, we can use an if statement. We can check the food item if it's liked or not. So for here, we can use icons. So if it's like, we can get the favorite that is filled. And else, if not, then we can use the icons. So we can call outlined, and we can call favorite border here in order to outline that. Content description, we can make it to be null. Now our items here are looking perfectly. So we have here our food item. Directly, we can go back here. Let's display here our food item. Another case, I want to give it a modifier, and we can give it the modifier of 80dp, and we can make this item actually clickable. We can call on food item click. So we can pass in here the index of that particular item that is going to be clicked. Okay, so now we have here our food items. Let's go back here. Okay, so now here everything is looking perfectly. So you can see we have here our items, and it's similar to how our design is looking here. So basically we can extract here an interactive mode. Let's start an interactive mode, and here everything is scrollable. And when we try to click this, you can see it's changing according to its state. And if we click again, can see it's not going to go to favorite. So now we have completed to create our food app screen. So the next case is we want also to hook the navigation and also create our detailed screen. So let's try first to run this inside our phone and see the changes which we have made. Okay, so here is our app launched, and it has been launched successfully. So you can see we have here our food go and order your favorite, and everything here is looking perfectly. So when we click here, you can see it's changing. And also whenever we click here, it's actually changing, and the slider is also working perfectly. And here, whenever we try to type, you can see everything is being typed correctly. Okay, so the next thing which we have to do is to create our detailed screen. So let's do this next. Okay, now let's create here a new coding class or file. And here we can call this food detailed screen. Okay, let's call this food detailed screen. Now we're going to need here the food item and also the navigation bar. we have here a screenshot. So you can see we want to build this. And here basically you can see we have these two items and we can use here a scaffold at our advantage in order to do this. Let's create here first the scaffold. So we want to pass in here the navigation icon. So we can pass in here the icon. Let's give it the image vector. Let's give it a clickable and we can say on click. We can call here navigate back. And here we can pass in the title. So we don't want anything to be here. So you could keep like food detail or anything else. And for actions, let's pass in here actions. Okay, so here we can add opt-in for Material 3 experimental APIs for our top bar. So I think here our top bar is actually looking perfectly now. And we can make everything inside the column. So let's create just a column here. And here we can use our inner padding and we can give it the default padding of 16 dp. And we can fill the max size. Let's give it the arrangement and we can give it space around. So everything I think is looking perfectly. Now let's create here a preview. Let's pass in here the theme. And here let's make is dark theme. Let's make it true so that we can preview also in a dark theme, for example. Let's pass in here the food item because this is the required. So we can use our dummy food entries to get a random item. Okay, let's re-preview here. Okay, so our preview here is ready. So you can see we have our navigation icons. So we have here our items looking perfectly. Okay, now let's proceed the next. So the next case is to create this particular image here. We can pass in here the painter and use the painter resource because this image is available inside our project. So we can use the food item image resource. The next case, let's give it a modifier. And for content description, let's pass in here null first. Okay, to remove that error. Now the next case is I want to maintain the aspect ratio but modify the size of this particular. So we can use the aspect ratio composable. So I want to use 16f over 9f to keep this in this particular aspect ratio. And we can fill the max width. Sorry, fill max width. Next, we can call here the content scale and we want to call content scale.fit. Now we have our image ready. We can create a little bit of a spacer in order to create the space for, okay, let's pass in here the modifier. Next, we can create this text here. We can use the name of the food item. Let's change the style. Okay, the title medium here. And we can change the font weight and we can give it a bold. Let's copy this, paste it here. And instead, we are going to give it 4dp. Now, next case, we want to create this bar here. So we can create our rating bar. Here we can pass in the food item. Let's create a row. So we want to fill the max width. We can use the default modifier. And we can align vertically for center. Now let's pass in here our first icon. So we can pass in here the image vector. Here we can use the star and we can pass in null. Let's give it a spacer and let's get a text. Okay, let's copy this and we can paste it here. Let's duplicate also this. And instead of writing here, so we can add the text to 14 minutes. Okay, let's preview here. Okay, so you can see here a preview, but this text here is not looking perfectly, and I think we have made maybe one error. Okay, so I think the issue is here. Okay, so now when we remove that alignment and give it space around, so now you can see everything is looking as how we intend here. So we have here our item and everything is looking perfectly. Okay, so the next case is we want to add this description here. Okay, now let's press Ctrl D and we can keep it here. So we want this space to be 6 dp. Now let's create here the text. And here we can use the food item and we can give it the description. Okay, so the next case is we want to get this here, but the height of this space, I want it to be 50 dp to give it a little bit of bump so that it can go below. So that's why using here a spacer of 50 dp. Now the next case is actually to create these two items here. Okay, so our design here is starting to take shape. So you can see we have here a cheeseburger and we have the descriptions. Now the next case is we want to create these particular items. So let's do this now. So the first case, you can see these two items are positioned in a row format. So for this case, we can create a row and then design other things inside that row. Now the first case, we want to fill the max width. So let's give the modifier and we want to fill the max width. The next case is we want to align, and the horizontal arrangement we want to push everything to the end. Now we want to create this spicy indicator here. So you can see we have something like an indicator. So let's go below here and create a new composable. Let's call this spicy indicator. Okay, so we can define here the spice level, and this one is going to be a float. Okay, so you can see this spice indicator contains like 3 items here. So we have this text and also the other indication. So we can make a column here. So we can fill the max width for our column. Next, let's add here the text. And for our text, we can call this spicy. Let's give the font weight and we want to make this bold. Okay, so we can give it a space for dp. Now we can create a custom indicator for this case. So you can see here we have this like a progress indicator. So let's create here another composable. Let's call this linear progress. Okay, so here I'm going to pass in several parameters. Okay, so we're going to use the track color. So the color behind here, so we're going to give it 3F. So we are going to use the surface variant. Let's press Ctrl D. Instead here is the progress color. You can use directly the primary container here. Let's primary container. Okay, that is looking perfectly. And the knob, if you want to change this particular knob color, and we can stick with similar to use the same color as our progress. Okay, let's define here the track height. It's going to be in terms of dp, and by default we can give it 8 dp. Next is the knob size. And this one is going to be 16 dp, and the knob corner radius. So for the corner, we can give it 4 dp. So the corners of this particular knob here. Okay, so those are the parameters which we want. So everything here is going to be contained inside a box, and then we can create here a canvas and draw behind it. So let's create a box. And we can give it a height, and the height here is the knob size. And we can give it a little bit of other spacing, so 1.5F for a case. I think that is going to look perfectly. And then we can fill the max width. Another case, we can now create our canvas. So inside here, we can create our custom designs. So let's give it the modifier, and we want to align it to the center to keep everything centered. Okay, so the first case is we want to keep this particular item centered inside our particular box. So to do this, we can get the track size. So we can call this track Y. and we can use size.height divided by 2 to make it centered. And now we have here our progress, that is progress x. So for progress, we can get here our size.width multiplied by the progress. That is going to be 0. So we want to position that particular knob in which place. Okay, so we can easily now draw the track, which is just this behind the scene here. So we can use draw line. Let's pass in here the color, and we can call track color. So starting, we can give it the offset. Let's use offset here. For X, we can give it 0F. Then we can use track Y. That is the whole size now which we want. So we can start from there. And our end, we can create another offset. So we're going to change the X, which is going to be the whole width. So we can call here size.width. And use our track Y because this one is going to be constant. Okay, so we can change the stroke width. So we can call here track height to px. So we can convert this to pixel. Okay, so if we want the stroke to be rounded, so we can call here our stroke. So you can use a square, but we want here a rounded one. Now we have here our track size. Now we can create another draw line. Now we can draw the actual progress which we have. So we can call here our progress color. So we can define here the start. Similarly, we can give it 0F. Our end, we can call here offset. Now here we can use our progress X and track Y. Now everything is going to be perfectly. Now we can change the stroke width and call here track height, convert it to pixel again, and we can change here our cap. Now we want to draw that particular knob. So to draw that, we can use here first, we determine the knob width. And we can convert this to pixel. Let's go knob height. So you can define it whenever you want. And here we want to draw a rectangle. Okay, now for the colors. And we want to get the offset for the top left. So we can pass in here the offset. Now X. So we want to position it at that particular progress which we have. And we can call here our progress X. And we want also to accommodate the knob width. So we can call here knob width, divide by 2. And Y. Similarly, we can do that. So we want to get the track Y minus our knob height, divide by 2, so that we can draw it at that particular point. Okay. We can define the size. Okay, so we can define here the knob width and the knob height to give it that particular size. And we can change the corner radius. Okay, so instead here we want to call draw rounded rectangle. Okay, so the error is going to go away. So right now here we have our knob. So what we have done, we have first we draw our track, that is just the behind. Then we are going to draw here the actual progress. So that particular spicy level, where is it going to be? So you can see we have defined it here. The next case is we want to draw, for example, that knob, which is this one. So we can draw a rounded rectangle and pass in it with this offset. So basically here now we have our linear progress with a knob. Now we can go inside here our spicy indicator. So let's pass in here a linear progress with a knob. Now we can pass in here the spicy level. So let's duplicate this. Okay, the next case is we want to create this to text here. So we can create the row. First, we want to fill the max width of this particular row. And we can give it the horizontal arrangement. Let's give it space between. and we can change the color. So let's use here green. Here we can change it to be hot. So let's go here and we can call our spicy indicator. Okay, so we can pass in here a spicy level. So we can call our food item. Now let's preview the changes which we have made. Okay, so you can see here our indicator is looking perfectly. But now we have to create the second part, which is just the portion which the user wants to actually order. So let's do this next. Okay, now to keep our composable again neatly organized, let's create here another composable and we can call this counter item. And here we can make this stateless. So we can pass in here the count to be in terms of a string. And here we can have decrement. Okay, so we have here our count and the decrement and the increment. So now we can create here our column. Okay, let's copy the text from here. Okay, so instead here we can just call this portion. Now let's pass in here the spacer. We can just copy this. Let's press Ctrl C and paste it here. Now here we have two items. So the first text we already created. Now we want to create these two items. So we can create another row. So we can center everything vertically. Now we can create a counter button. So we can create here another composable so that we can reuse it. Let's create this composable. We call this counter button. Okay, let's make this as a private. So here we can make the icon to be image vector and the on click. Okay, so we can create here a custom shape by using a surface. So let's create here a surface. We can give it the shape. So we can use the material theme. Let's use the medium shape. Let's change the color. And we can use the primary container color. Let's pass in here the modifier. Okay, so everything is going to be inside a box. Let's use the content alignment and we can align it to the center. Now let's create the icon button and the on click here. We can pass in the on click and inside here now we can pass in the icon and the content description. We can just make it as null. Okay, now we have here our button created. So we can create here our counter button, pass in the icon. So we can use icons default. Let's call remove. And the on click, we can call here decrement. Let's remove this. Okay, so for space here, we can give it 8 dp for our width. Now we can add the text that is the counter. So here we can have the count and let's give it the font size. So we can use 18 sp. Let's duplicate this and we can keep it here. Similarly, let's duplicate this. And instead of remove, here we can use add. And the on click, we can use increment. So now our counter button is actually complete. So let's use here our counter item. And here we're going to create our counter item. So let's create the state for this. Let's go at the top here. So we're going to start at 0. So our counter is going to start from 0. So for increment, we can call here our count on and for a decrement, so we can call here count -1. Okay. So the execution of this could be coming from your cloud. So here let's call to string, convert that. Okay, so now we have everything looking perfectly. So the next case I want to, let's preview this and see. Okay, so our preview here is done, but you can see the counter is not showing here. It's been pushed out of bound. So it's going to be beyond the screen here. So how can we do to fix this? Basically, we can use one simple trick here. Let's use the modifier. and we can give it a weight of 1F. Sorry, weight. Now let's preview again. Okay, so now it's doing a trick. The portion here is actually shown in the counter button, but now it's still taking up this space here. So to fix this, we can do another trick here. That is a simple trick. Let's create another spacer. We can add here the modifier. And similarly, let's give this a weight of 1F. So now let's reload again. Okay, so now you can see everything is perfectly positioned as how we intended here. So you can see the spicy is taking up the space and the portion here. So everything is looking perfectly. Another case which I want to modify here. So instead of just minusing this, because it can go to negative amount. So I think we can do a simple check here. If the counter is actually greater than 0, then we can do the minus, else we can just return 0 here. Okay, so I think this logic makes perfect sense here. Okay, so now our design is now taking shape. So the last thing which has remained here to create is these two buttons here. So let's do this next. Okay, so now to create this here, we can create a row. So now let's just collapse this. We can create another row below here. Okay, so the first case, I want this to be positioned at the bottom. So to do a simple trick here, I want to fill the max width. Sorry, fill the max size to take up the whole size. This one is going to push everything, but I want to wrap the content so that I can break the alignment rule. I can align it to a place where I want. So for this case, I can call alignment.bottom center. Otherwise, it's going to refuse to do this. For my case, I'm going to call fill max width. So that is the simple trick. Okay, now let's pass in here the horizontal arrangement. So we can call space between, and vertically we want to align it to the center vertically. Okay, the first case is we can create that card. And we can use here our card colors. Let's call the container color, and we can use the primary color. Okay, so inside here, I'm going to use a box, and we can change the content alignment, and we want to center everything to the center. Now you can pass in here the text. So for the part of text, we can call the food item dot price, change the style, and we can convert this to string. Okay, now we have our first item. So next we can create this button here. So that is simple. So let's create here a button, and here we can create our text. Call this order now. Okay, so for our text, we want to give it a padding of 16 dp. Push it and make it a little bit bigger. So we can change the shape because this one is going to be a circular shape. Okay, so now I think everything is looking perfectly as how we intend. So let's preview again. Okay, so here is our data, but you can see the card here is actually not positioned perfectly. So I think we can do one thing. Let's copy this padding which we have here and give to this particular box. Okay, so inside here our box, let's go to our preview again. Okay, so we have here a preview box and everything is looking perfectly, but for the price level, I want to change the text. So let's go to our text, and here we can use something. Let's press Ctrl X and remove this. And here we can use the $sign. Then we can use the string template and pass in here our price. So guys, let's leave it here for this video. So if you find this video helpful, please don't forget to provide a like, subscribe, and share for more videos. So until next time, bye bye. See you in the next video.